Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's afternoon program. As you are aware, on a weekly basis, the South African Bar Association hosts a speaker to deal with a legal topic intended to assist young practitioners with training and development, and in so doing, to improve the quality of legal practitioners in our courts. This is one of the core values we hold as an organization. It is an honor and privilege to host Advocate Dexter L.J. Ryneveldt. By way of providing a brief legal background of Advocate Ryneveldt, he is currently a practicing advocate in private practice, practicing as such predominantly in the Gauteng province in the Pretoria and Johannesburg High Courts. He has a general law practice with a specified interest in commercial law, personal injury law, pension fund law, and labor law. He has been practicing as such for over a decade. He obtained his MBA degree with merit from the University of Greenwich in the United Kingdom. He has a particular interest in corporate governance, where he obtained a postgraduate diploma in business management in corporate governance from Monash SA University. He further obtained a certificate from the London School of Economics and Political Sciences in the United Kingdom in company law and corporate governance. He is currently enrolled for his doctorate in business leadership at the University of South Africa, where he is conducting research on the South African and the Netherlands Twin Peaks model as a preferred model for the financial regulation. He is currently writing up his final chapter of his doctoral thesis. Advocate Ryneveldt shall be addressing us on a topic titled Financial Regulations, Twin Peaks Model in South Africa. A few housekeeping matters. These sessions are recorded, and we appeal to participants to ensure that your microphones are muted and that your video cameras are switched off. During the address, all participants shall automatically be muted. Should a participant have a question, simply raise your hand using the Microsoft Teams platform. Alternatively, pose your questions within the chat box, and such question will be put to Advocate Ryneveldt. During the question and answer session, please restrict questions to the speaker relative to the topic under discussion, and only pose such question when called upon. Without any further ado, I now hand it over to Advocate Ryneveldt. Over to you, Advocate Ryneveldt.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Advocate Jassat. I just want to find out, can you all hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
Thank you. So, okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to present to you this afternoon something, or will I basically say a topic that is very close to my heart, and that is financial regulation. Financial regulation plays quite an important role in society. And quickly, basically, just to give you a backdrop as to this doctoral that I'm currently doing, I am embarking on a study where I am specifically looking at a financial regulatory model. And the financial regulatory model that I'm looking at is the Twin Peak model. So as you can see from this depiction, welcome to the Twin Peaks model. It is a very specialized kind of a model that has basically been put to the fore. That was in the early 1990s from the United Kingdom by Michael Taylor. But what I am going to do this afternoon, I will basically just give you a broad overview of the specific act that deals with financial regulation. Like I've said, financial regulation is quite important. It is an aspect that basically has a direct or indirect impact on each and every member of society. So let's have a look at the financial services industry. We have all encountered, or we have all interacted with the financial services industry. And as a consequence of that, we have basically been impacted by the act itself, which I am going to mention just within the next couple of minutes. But I think it is important as well also that we get to understand as to how important is the financial services industry in South Africa, we are talking of approximately 20.7 of South Africa's GDP comes from the financial services industry. That is actually quite a huge chunk of the GDP that contribute basically to the socio-economic development in South Africa. So one can then see that when it comes to the financial services industry, it is quite an important industry, and hence why that when it comes to the regulation of it, the regulation needs to be to such an extent that it can allow for transparency, that it can allow for accountability. And one of the things as well also that we need to take into consideration is that the FSI, financial services industry, is not immune to failed risk management protocols. And I believe that we can basically just reflect back and we will then see as to how vulnerable is the financial service industry. Specifically, we are looking at the Ryneveldt in 2001, which was ultimately then placed under administration. And then subsequently, we are looking at African Bank in 2014, also put under administration. And more recently, we are talking about the VBS Mutual Bank. And I mean, we all know when it comes to VBS Mutual Bank, but one of the sad things when it comes to Ryneveldt, when it comes to African Bank, when it comes to VBS Mutual Bank, is basically where one actually need to have due regard to the financial consumers. How has the mismanagement of these banks basically impacted the consumers of these banks? And that was one of the main reasons when the Ministry of Finance looked at what kind of regulatory model can we establish in South Africa so that we can ensure that the playing field is level. And what do I mean when I actually say the playing field? I mean that you have a win-win situation, not just for the financial companies, the financial institutions, but you're actually talking about a win-win for financial consumers as well. And that is the thing that basically prompted the enactment of a new regulatory model in South Africa. South Africa, as far as I know, is the only developing country with such kind of regulation. And then we only talk about other 4 developed countries that has a pure twin peak model financial regulation. And that is Belgium. We talk about the United Kingdom, and then we talk about Australia, and then we talk about the Netherlands. And in my doctoral study, I'm basically also then looking at how is the twin peak model basically structured within the Netherlands. So in a sense, I'm basically embarking on a comparative kind of a study when it comes to taking the twin peak model within a developing country context, and then basically look as to how the specific twin peak model as well operate within a developed country. And I've actually chosen the Netherlands. So the FSI business is in the business of risk acceptance as it aggregates and transfer financial resources. Risk acceptance as it aggregates and transfer financial resources. And when we have regard to Ryneveldt, African Bank, VBS Mutual Bank as well, we actually get a clear picture as to how important it is when it comes to making sure that there is a financial regulatory model in place that can have the foresight when we actually then start talking about financial stability. The act that is actually quite important and of which I'm actually also looking at within my doctoral study is the Financial Sector Regulatory Act number 9 of 2017. So for abbreviation purposes, I will refer to it as FSRA. And this is then or the establishment of the twin peak model has basically been put to the fore when it comes to this specific FSRA. So there is three essential pillars that we need to have a look at when it comes to the South African twin peak model. But actually also one can actually also say then a twin peak model from a general perspective. We need to have a look at the market conduct of business, and then we need to have a look at coordination, and then we need to have a look at prudential regulation. And as we continue, we will actually get to see when we talk about twin peaks, literally and figuratively speaking, we're talking about two peaks. So they basically is that we are talking about two sets of regulatory institutions that has to ensure that when it comes to the FSI in South Africa, there is appropriate checks and balances in place so that South Africa ultimately can ensure, or the South African Reserve Bank per se, can ensure that there is financial stability. So we are looking at Section 33, where we look at the Prudential Authority. So this is the first peak that we are looking at. And based on this peak, we are looking at it actually regulate the safety and the soundness of the financial companies or the financial institutions itself. So that is then where we talk about prudential regulation, and hence why we actually have the name Prudential Authority. But where does this Prudential Authority then resides? It resides in the South African Reserve Bank, but it is an institution that has specifically been brought into existence as a result of FSRA. And in a sense, it is also then independent from the South African Reserve Bank, specifically that it only basically just focus on a regulation and regulation from a prudential point of view. Ultimately, we have Section 57 of FSRA, and in terms of Section 57 of FSRA, we actually get the Financial Services Conduct Authority. I believe that we must have actually also maybe have seen some advertisement from the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, which is the FSRA. And one of the main tasks for the Financial Sector Conduct Authority is basically then to regulate the markets. So we are looking then at market conduct of business. So when we talk about market conduct, we basically then say that in terms of Section 57, the FSRA is responsible to ensure that they protect consumers, financial consumers. So they will specifically basically just look as to how can they implement certain protocols in order then to ensure that financial consumers, their interest is protected. I believe that we can now actually start to see a clear picture when we actually start talking about a twin peak model. The twin peak model, it is basically Section 33, where we actually look at the Prudential Authority, and then ultimately the other peak that we are talking about is then in terms of Section 57, where we actually talk then of the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. What is important of the Financial Sector Conduct Authority is that it replaced the Financial Services Board. So when FSRA was enacted, immediately basically where certain processes and protocols were followed, it has now ultimately replaced the Financial Services Board. So we then start to talk about financial soundness of the financial sector industry itself and market infrastructure. Then we actually talk about protect consumers against the risk that FSI may fail. And then we talk about FSCA. We look at fair treatment of customers. We look at market integrity and efficiency. And ultimately, we are looking at financial education. So all these objectives has been set out in FSRA. where the Prudential Authority specifically knows that it has to work in tandem with the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, and then ultimately as well in tandem with the other structures within the financial sector to ensure that they can attain stability, and not just attain financial stability, but then ultimately then maintain financial stability. So this is a depiction, so this actually talks about financial stability. So when it comes to financial regulation, the key word is financial stability. And when we have a look then at the collaboration and coordination, let me just quickly go back. Yeah, we look at collaboration and coordination. Sorry, yes, sir.
My sincere apologies for interrupting you. I think that you intend sharing your screen.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me quickly do that, and then I'm going to go back.
No
and
problem.
quickly just run through it so that you can see it. Okay. So you can see my screen now, yes?
Yes, perfectly in order.
Okay, awesome. So I'm quickly just going to go back. My sincere apologies for that. Okay, so there we are. Okay, so financial regulation, I've actually mentioned it is actually quite important, and it actually has a direct and indirect impact on each and every one of us. Financial services industry, that is your 20.7, which I have actually spoken about. And then I've mentioned Ryneveldt, African Bank, and then VBS Mutual Bank. And then I was talking about risk acceptance as it aggregates and transfer financial resources. The South African twin peak model, we're talking about market conduct of business, coordination and prudential regulation. Financial sector regulation, the Act 9 of 2017, we're looking at Section 33. And that is your Prudential Authority. Section 57, we have the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. Financial soundness of FSI and market infrastructure, protect consumers against the risk that FSI may fail. And then we have the FSCA, which I've also mentioned, that it replaced the Financial Services Board, the FSB, and that one of the core responsibilities is fair treatment of customers, market integrity and efficiency. And then we talk about financial education. And hence why that at times we actually see advertisements on TV where they normally will basically call on the public if they are going to have some financial education seminars or sessions. This is the picture, financial stability. That is the ultimate goal when it comes to making sure that the regulatory model, which is the Twin Peaks model, is actually to such, or actually operates to such an extent where it can assure or basically attain financial stability, but then at the same time can maintain financial stability. When we have regard then to FSRA, the Act, we actually get to see that we do not just talk about the two peaks, the Prudential Authority, and then ultimately the FSCA. We are talking about other institutions that also have the responsibility to ensure that when it comes to attaining and maintaining financial stability, they also need to work in tandem, in collaboration, in coordination with these two peaks. And that is your Financial System Council regulation. We have the Financial Stability Oversight Committee, and then we have the Financial Sector Interministerial Council, and then obviously we have the South African Reserve Bank. So what this arrows basically depict is that there is a flow of information that needs to flow between these groups or institutions, ultimately flowing into the Twin Peak model, and then also then the information that is gathered in relation to possible risk for financial stability needs to actually flow out so that at the end of the day, they are informed and they can take and make the appropriate steps in the event that there is a risk to South Africa's financial stability. The Prudential Authority, we're talking about the macro-prudential regulation, and then we talk about a micro-prudential business conduct regulation. So that, in a sense, is basically then the crux when it comes to the Twin Peak model. What we also then have, we have the Financial Intelligence Center, and then we have the National Credit Regulator as well also. And then once more, we can actually see then the flow of arrows. That's basically information that needs to flow to and then ultimately from these institutions into the Twin Peak model. So this is basically your Twin Peak model. And then that information that they gather is that basically comes from these institutions. They need to assess. They need to then actually give feedback. So then at the end of the day, they can then attain financial stability. One of the most important attributes when it comes to the Twin Peaks model is collaboration and coordination. Having regard to the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis, one of the biggest problems that has been picked up by financial regulators and specifically the Ministry of Finances in all the countries in the world is to say that when there is financial or with these financial regulators, why is it that they could not have actually sensed or they could not have actually foreseen that there will be a financial crisis, global crisis in 2008 and 2009? And one of the main reasons for that is that there was basically a lack of collaboration and then coordination. So when it comes to the Twin Peak model, as per Michael Taylor, the proponent of the Twin Peak model, he places emphasis on collaboration and coordination. And even when one actually then starts to look at FSRA, you start to look at the legislature in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in the United Kingdom, and then ultimately in Australia that has this Twin Peaks model, you actually see there is a lot of emphasis placed on collaboration and coordination. And that's basically then the lessons learned as a result of the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. At the end of my presentation, I am also going to present to you a press release that comes from Germany. And in terms of that press release, there is already indications that we are now talking about the next financial crisis. So the big question is how close are we to the next big financial crisis? But then at the end, I will present it to you. I will give you an opportunity to quickly just peruse through it and then analyze that media statement that was released yesterday. And then basically we will then bring it into context of the 2008 and 2009 global financial crisis. And then from there, I believe that we will actually then have a clear indication as to how close we are to the next financial crisis. So then the big question that comes to mind is that having regard to that statement, media statement that comes from Germany, is that how well prepared are the financial systems in South Africa, the financial institutions in South Africa. And in a matter of fact, will this then not be an opportunity in the event that that worst case scenario comes to full realization, will that then not be a litmus test for this Twin Peaks model in South Africa? Once more, when we're actually talking about the litmus test, we will actually then see and focus on collaboration. We will have to focus on coordination. So what that basically means is that they must be able to foresee that there is a contagion, financial contagion on the horizon. How good can they communicate with one another? How good can they actually work with one another? And what kind of impact does all these other institutions and committees basically also and councils basically play in order to ensure that when we talk about the next big financial crisis, is it going to be that the Twin Peaks model will actually prove that most of the harm will be prevented, or will we actually feel the full brunt of the next financial crisis that is currently on the horizon? So we will have a look. I will give you an opportunity to quickly read that financial, that media statement from Germany, and then we're quickly going to have a discussion at the end of my presentation. The objectives of FSRA. What is the objectives? If we look at section 7.1, the objectives has been set out very clearly. One of the obvious objections is we talk about financial stability. Then we talk about the safety and the soundness of financial institutions. And I just quickly want to come back to financial stability. Financial stability is quite a broad concept itself, and it's quite a complex process and concept itself. And then why do I say so? It's because we need to look at the financial markets. We need to look at the financial institutions, and then ultimately we need to have a look at the financial infrastructure. So in a sense, you look at them in isolation, but at the same time, you actually need to have a look at all that financial markets, financial institutions, and then ultimately financial infrastructure from a holistic, interactive kind of a way. One of the main things as well also as to why South Africa has been prompted into adopting this financial regulatory model, which is the TPM, is that prior to the enactment of FSRA in August 2017, we had a financial regulatory system, or basically model in South Africa, where every financial regulatory sector, so we talk about the insurance, we talk about the pension, we talk about even that will be your long-term and short-term, basically, because there's specific acts when it comes to that. For insurance, we look at medical protective cover as well, also because that in a sense also forms part of the financial services industry. And then ultimately as well also where each of these institutions were regulated in silos. And as a result of that, like I've already actually pointed out with that depiction, is that one of the biggest problems that was basically observed and the lessons learned is that when it comes to coordination, collaboration, although I must at the same time say that when it comes to the global financial crisis that we've experienced globally, South Africa's financial system was actually quite resilient. And hence why we didn't actually feel the full brunt or the full impact of the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. So the objective, the safety and the soundness of financial institutions, which is of extreme importance itself. So what we talk about, the safety and soundness of financial institutions, we basically say that how accountable are you, how accountable are you, financial institutions, financial companies, to ensure that your management system is to such an extent where we talk about safety and we talk about soundness. One of the other objectives, we talk about the fair treatment and protection of financial consumers. which is extremely important, and that is basically where we actually talk about the two peaks, the efficiency and integrity of the financial system, the prevention of financial crime, financial inclusion, which is one of the major differences between the South African Twin Peak model and then the Netherlands Twin Peak model, and I will actually say compared to all the other Twin Peak models globally. Then ultimately, we have transformation of the financial sector. Once more, one of the unique features of the South African Twin Peak model. And then we have the confidence in the financial system. So when we talk about confidence in financial system, we talk about confidence not just for the companies, financial companies alone, but we talk about the confidence of each and every financial consumer. Because that is basically what the Twin Peak model basically at the core stands for, that the level field when it comes to the financial sector needs to be leveled to the extent where you do not need only just protect the financial companies, but you also need to protect financial consumers as well. So now we also need to understand, but what is the importance of FSRA? And the importance of FSRA basically is set out in section 9.1. And I am talking about legislative inconsistencies. So section 9.1 says the inconsistency between this act and a provision of another act that is a financial sector law, the provision of this act prevails. So immediately we get to see that FSRA is superior, because section 9 clearly says that where there is inconsistency, you must have regard and sole regard to FSRA as basically set out in section 9.1. And we will also then get to see as well also that this FSRA plays quite an important role, because it has a direct and indirect impact that it actually plays, and I will actually also show to you what other legislations, the impact indirectly and basically the direct impact that it actually have on the other financial services legislation. So then we look at section 9.2. We are talking about the inconsistencies between a regulation or regulatory instrument made in terms of this act and a provision of a regulation or regulatory instrument made in terms of a specific financial sector law. So the regulation or regulatory instrument made in terms of FSRA, that is the one that basically then prevails. So this then gives us a clear indication as to how important FSRA is. And in a sense, one can actually say is that FSRA basically trumps any other financial sector kind of a law, because section 9.1 is quite clear. The provisions of this act prevails. When it comes to regulation and regulatory instruments as well, also FSRA basically prevails as well. So hence why then when we are confronted with a pension fund law kind of a conundrum, or basically a legal conundrum, or may it be maybe long-term, short-term insurance as well, may it be any other kind of legal problem that we encounter within the financial sector, we need to have regard to the importance of FSRA. So what that basically then also means is that when you are confronted with a financial legal problem, where for argument's sake you have a client, consumer, that basically comes to you and say, but I actually have a problem with A or B financial company itself. What you need to have a look at as well also, you need to specifically now also go to FSRA, but where you now need to have a look at what does the regulation as per section 9.2 basically say regulation or regulatory instrument that has been called into existence because as a result of the empowerment of FSRA. And then once you can establish that, that will then give you a clear indication as to how you can go along and basically provide the best possible legal services then to your client. So the starting point will be, yes, you analyze the financial legal problem. You actually also then get to understand as well also who is the parties at play. But then most importantly as well also is that you basically also then have you have a look at what is the latest directives, what is basically the latest regulation or regulatory instruments that has been made in terms of FSRA with the overall objective of financial stability. And in a sense, what FSRA also then say, and we've been talking about that now quite often, is that it all comes down to also protecting financial consumers. So we then need to have a look at that regulations and regulatory instruments as well as Section 9.1 and Section 9.2. So we can clearly see that FSRA is quite an important piece of legislation when we are confronted with a financial legal problem. So we need to have a look at the legislative impact. When you have regard to FSRA, you actually look at, or you need to have regard as well also if you are confronted with maybe a problem in the bank. You look at the Banks Act 94 of 1990. So what I basically mean by legislative impact, and what I've actually also said at the beginning, is that FSRA has a direct and indirect impact on quite a number of legislations and acts in South Africa. And one of those is the Bank Act. We have now actually also seen as to how important FSRA is in relation to Section 9.1 and 9.2. We look at the Companies Act as well, also 71 of 2008. We look at the Competition Act of 89 and 1998. It definitely has an impact on Competition Act. And one of an example that one can basically make, Competition Act is all about to ensure that, in a sense, yes, consumers are protected. That's basically an objective of FSRA, the two-and-peak model. But then at the same time as well, also for the Competition Act is also then to ensure market, basically in the sense conduct, or how the companies basically conduct themselves within the market. So hence why we can then see that clearly FSRA has a direct impact in the Competition Act of 89 and 1998, Consumer Protection Act of 68 of 2008. And then we talk about the National Credit Act. And I've listened very attentively as well also to the presenter of last week. And the presenter of last week was also very much focused then on the importance in the sense of there needs to be a level playing field when it comes to the banks and then basically your financial consumer. And then where that all comes down to is that as set out in the National Credit Act is that where normally in the past a bank only basically just need to follow certain steps. And then once they follow that step, maybe within 3 months, a immovable property can basically can be put up for execution. But the presenter of last week also very clearly actually also stated that now with new legislation, and in a sense we're actually talking about the National Credit Act and then the impact and then the influence it basically have in protecting consumers, that will be your financial consumers, your credit consumers as well also. We actually now get them to see that the FSRA has a direct impact on the National Credit Act as well. And then we have the Financial Intelligence Center Act as well. Also clearly we can see that it also has direct and indirect impact on the Financial Intelligence Center Act. Financial Ombudsman the financial ombudsman has also been established in terms of FSRA. So what that basically all comes down to in terms of section 176, it all comes down to leveling the playing field, basically, financial consumers, but more importantly, access. But I think what is important that we need to understand as well also is that we talk about affordability. So when there is a financial, a client, a financial consumer has a problem with a financial company itself, in terms of section 176, they can go to the financial ombudsman and basically report their discourse to the financial ombudsman. And as set out in section 176, it comes down to then affordability. But one of the most important things that we need to remember as well also, that the financial ombudsman has a jurisdiction, a monetary jurisdiction to the value of 800,000. So whenever you are confronted with a client and the client has got a problem, a financial client, problem with the financial company, one of the advices will be then to say, you know what, client, go to the financial ombudsman. But one of the things that you need to have a look at is that it falls within the monetary jurisdiction of that 800,000 that the financial ombudsman has basically set out. So it comes down to also then affordability, effectiveness, independent and fair alternative dispute resolution process for complaints. And it is all about financial institutions in relation to financial products, services, and service provided by market infrastructure. So one of the other things that we need to also then basically that we need to take cognizance of is that whatever decision comes from the financial ombudsman, it definitely has the same impact as if it is actually coming from a civil court. So that's basically one of the things that we can basically just put in the back of our minds. So for now, I would actually like us to have a look at the Evergrande, China. And this is what I have been talking about. I believe that we must have actually seen some waves that has been made in relation to Evergrande, China. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you now an opportunity to quickly just read through the media statement that came from Germany. And then from there, we can quickly just have a brief discussion and basically read it within the context of financial stability. So let me quickly just bring that up. Ahmed, I'm actually noting the time, but let's quickly just have a look at this. Okay, there we are. So I'm going to give you an opportunity just to quickly, maybe just so 5 minutes quickly. It is an exercise that we'll do together, that we can quickly just have a look, we can read, peruse, and then we'll quickly just analyze. And that is the media statement, Press Mitteilung from Berlin, and that was yesterday, the 10th of November. So you can, I'm going to give you, it's 42:16. So I'm going to give you up until say 47:16, just to quickly have just to read, analyze, and then let's basically just have an open debate and discussion concerning this, because this is quite important. So yeah, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do that.
Sorry for my interruption and for my interruption, Advocate Ryneveldt. I think we have perused through the document.
Excellent, excellent. So what we can do, I know that we're supposed to have a question and answer session, but I believe this is actually of so much importance if we have regard to this a media statement that went out yesterday. And I have actually also taken into regard as well also that today it seems like Evergrande has actually made payment. But the big question is, and that's basically within the financial stability sectors, for how long will it be that they will be limping from month to month in making payment timelessly? I think one of the most important things that we need to understand as well also as to why Evergrande is so important and where it can basically put in motion a massive contagion, financial contagion, where we are talking about a serious ramifications globally and as a result of a possible bankruptcy of it. But I just want to get your input in relation to this. And then I'm actually also going to make a link in relation to the Lehman Brothers. And we will actually see it, we will have a look at the similarities. And this is then just so that we are more like in tune as to almost like what is the possibility that we are talking about a worst case scenario of another major financial crisis globally. One of the things that we also need to understand as well also is that in China, the real estate sector, which Evergrande is part of, basically contributes 29% of the total GDP in China. So that in itself, if it is that it actually falters, because the China Evergrande, the second largest real estate developer in China. So I just want to get your input and then we can quickly just have a brief discussion. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Advocate Ryneveldt. Could I please ask you to stop sharing your screen?
I will do so. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your address. I expected nothing less. I have now opened a platform for a brief question and answer session. By way of a reminder, participants who have a question, simply raise your hand using the Microsoft Teams platform. Alternatively, post your question within the chat box and such question shall be put to Advocate Ryneveldt. Advocate Ryneveldt, there's a question from Acting Judge Romeo Ntambeleni. Acting Judge Romeo, you can simply unmute your video and or your mic.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for such a wonderful presentation, Advocate Ryneveldt. Mine more is in relation to what you have just discussed, in pertaining to the relevance that you have mentioned in terms of the section that you have referred to, the section 7.1 on the objectives. You spoke about the efficacy and integrity of financial systems under section 35E, and you said the prevention of financial crime. And given the kind of situation that we had in South Africa with VBS, and also we had Fidentia before, and the last one is the big corporate scandal that we also have. I just forgot the name now. Do you think that this legislation now will actually help in preventing this? Because in the US, you know about SOX, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and how it actually helped the US in terms of dealing with all these important financial crimes that were happening. I just want your comment relating to that.
Thank you very much, Judge Ntambeleni. It's actually quite a very important question that you've posed. And one of the things that we need to have due regard to is that the important function of the TPM, the Twin Peak model, which is basically FSRA, is to ensure that they can basically act in a proactive manner So when we talk about preventing financial crime within South Africa, that in a sense is one of the main objectives or basically targets for the Twin Peak model, to ensure that they can basically prevent they can basically they can prevent people to commit financial crimes, for the main reason that those financial crimes will be able to be picked up from an infant stage. It's not going to be picked up at a later stage where, in a sense, you cannot even put in any mechanisms to prevent a further, if I can use the word, a blood flow. So in a sense, FSRA all comes down to that, yes, it actually stems the blood flow immediately once it is actually picked up. And one of the things of Twin Peak, we talk about collaboration and coordination between the peaks, is that these peaks needs to actually pick up financial crime. And then once they pick it up, they need to collaborate and coordinate. And then they need to actually ensure that it is given through to the most appropriate. That will be the police, or that will be people that actually investigate white-collar crime, financial crimes, so that they can actually stem it. And it actually doesn't go to the extent where we now had the most recent scenario with VBS Mutual Bank. So yes, it definitely plays quite an important role.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer, and we hope that in future we won't have Steinhoff and VBS. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Dr. Ryneveldt. I have a question. I personally cannot remember when I've entered a branch. Everything is done through correspondence with my private banker. Banks such as Investec have no branches, and it seems to be working rather effectively. I assert that other financial institutions shall soon follow suit. My question is, does the aforesaid Twin Peaks model, Stockholm, and/or FSRA cater for such eventuality, that being all and/or some financial institutions closing their physical branches and its obvious negative impact on employment within the Republic?
Okay. That's actually also a very important question, because when it comes down to the development of the financial sector based on technology, one of the main things as well also that when it comes to the Twin Peak model is also then to keep trade with the latest market developments. So what you are talking about is that you're having access to a private banker. There's basically no need for you to actually go into a branch, which is convenient. And that's basically the direction that we actually move in. So when it comes to now the Twin Peak model, it comes down to FSRA. We are now talking about regulations as per basically, like I've set out, Section 9.1, Section 9.2, where it says that whatever regulation is made in terms of FSRA, that will have superior authority. And what basically happens is that the Twin Peaks, in a sense, that is your prudential authority, that is your financial sector conduct authority, they actually set out certain regulations. And definitely one of those regulations will definitely keep tabs of the market developments, technological developments itself, and then to make sure that, seeing that we are now talking about a virtual platform of banking services interaction, that there is specific regulations, rules in place to protect the financial consumer, but then at the same time as well also protect the financial company. So that's then where one will actually have a look at the regulations, the directives as actually set out by FSRA. So yes, that is one of the things that they will most definitely have a look at, and they will continuously basically assess. Because one of the major problems as well also that we are all faced with is basically cyber attacks as well also. And there is also certain protocols that needs to be in place. I mean, we look at the Banking Act as well also. Certain criteria has basically been set out in the Banking Act as well also when it comes to technological advancements. So then what then will happen is that will also then basically be assessed in terms of FSRA, the Twin Peaks model, because we need to remember that the Prudential Authority is basically, it has the power, And then also the Financial Sector Conduct Authority has the power to ensure financial stability, and that goes and it has to filter through to the financial consumer itself. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Advocate Ryneveldt. Advocate Ryneveldt, due to time restrictions, I'm going to only pose one question from the chat box. I'm going to read it verbatim. This is a question from Attorney Albert Marias. It reads as follows: the financial sector has to be strictly regulated, but the FIC Act destroys the confidentiality between attorney and client that has up to now existed for hundreds of years. This will lead to the dismiss of the attorney's profession. Is it justified to destroy the attorney's profession when, time after time, it is the financial sector that is guilty of misconduct involving huge amounts? Okay.
Thank you so much for that question. I think once more we need to have a look as to what is the objectives of FSRA. And the objective of FSRA, and working in tandem with all the other kinds of legislation, is to ensure that you actually protect both the consumer and then the company as the financial consumer and then the financial company. But importantly as well also, we need to have a look at the protection of attorney and client confidentiality. In the event that you as counsel or attorney basically picks up that there is an intrusion when it comes to that, that is an aspect that can be taken up with the ombudsman. And they will then be able to look into it and then basically hold these companies accountable in terms of FSRA and in terms of that specific act that basically deals with that financial sector, or not sector, but basically the financial institution. For argument's sake, if it is the banks, we have a look at the Banking Act, and then we need to read it with FSRA, and then we have to make sure that they are actually kept accountable. Another thing as well also is that when there is any complications on an infringement of right, obviously that can actually be escalated to Prudential Authority and even the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. And why do I say so? I say so is because they are also responsible to advise the Ministry of Finance when it comes to a policy. So you can escalate. They can perhaps then basically say, you know what, we are not able to assist, but at least they will be able to actually give input when it comes to financial policy regulations, in order then to ensure that the rights of the consumer, the rights of the company, and specifically your attorney and client confidentiality, that specific relationship is adhered to at all times, and it does not actually negatively impacts your client per se. So that's then how I will answer that. Yes.
Advocate Ryneveldt, due to time limitations, I have regrettably closed the question and answer session. What remains, on behalf of the South African Bar Association, we sincerely thank you for your insight and obviously for your time. We are cognizant of the important work that you are doing for the country and her people. Furthermore, you are currently working closely with the South African Bar Association, and you play a fundamental role therein. It goes without saying that you are eternally grateful. Appreciation to all those that have participated virtually and shall be watching this session at their leisure. These sessions are recorded, and the recordings can be found upon the South African Bar Association website, that being www.rsabar.net. I thank you.
Thank you so much.